Hello everyone. I hope this message finds you fit and fine. My name is Shashank Tyagi and I welcome you all to our discussion on India-Sri Lanka relations. Before we start, let's think around two important question themes from this topic so that you can squeeze out maximum value from our discussion. Question 1. India-Sri Lanka relations have come long way from centered on managing Tamil political issue to have multiple engagement on different issues. Now, full stop, comment, 15 marks, 200 words. Now, to understand the demand of the question, pick three important key areas which are mentioned here. India-Sri Lanka relations come long way. So, do you know certain points to prove yes, India-Sri Lanka relations have come long way? Centered on managing Tamil political issue. What is Tamil political issue? And what were the terms of engagement between India and Sri Lanka on this particular issue? Now, third part, engaging on multiple issues. So, what multiple issues this question is referring? So, we need these points intact. This will prove that our understanding is as per the demand of question. Now, second question. In the backdrop of Chinese presence, discuss significance and challenges in India-Sri Lanka relations. So, backdrop of China and significance and challenges reflect the demand of question. We are going to have all of this in today's discussion. Let's start. First, let's talk about the location of Sri Lanka. You know, strategically located in Indian Ocean near one of the busiest sea trade routes. That is why Sri Lanka is important not just for India but for China as well. Our southernmost neighbor, and India is the only neighbor country of Sri Lanka. We are separated by the Spark Strait. We are going to talk about Kachativu Island issue also. Now talking about history, because history is one of the determinant of foreign policy between two nations. So at one point of time, this Sri Lanka was ruled by singular monarch as well as different kingdoms, and they used to have this conflictual relationship with some of the southern Indian kingdoms as well. But the Sri Lanka, as we call it now, was forced after getting independence from Britishers in 1948. If we talk about the ethnic profile of newly independent Sri Lanka, majority of them are Sinhalese. They were having apprehensions that the Tamil population, which migrated from Tamil Nadu area mainly, were actually in important positions during this British Raj in Ceylon, which we now call Sri Lanka. And that is why after this independence, these areas where Tamilians reside, they were disenfranchised. They were not having right to vote. Keep aside the welfare programs of the government. So it means you can say the seeds of civil war in Sri Lanka were sown in 1948 itself. Now, talking about the cultural aspects, we have deep cultural ties based on Buddhism. As it is said that Ashoka's son, Ashoka the great son, Mahinda, was the one who actually brought Buddhism in Sri Lanka, along with Sangamitra, the daughter of Ashoka the Great. And they also brought sapling from this tree of Gaya, Bodhi tree. So this represents the deep links between Sri Lanka and India. Now, India's intervention in Sri Lankan civil war. This is the major chapter of our relationship. Now, as I told you, that Tamil population majorly migrated by Britishers, and they were present in this northern part and eastern part of Sri Lanka, right? And they were demanding that they should be treated equally, and which they were not in the independent Sri Lanka. That is why this conflict started. In starting, some major parties which were representing Tamil rights or Tamil, you can say Tamil demands, they formed TULF. Tamil United Liberation Front, and this front demanded that they should be given autonomy to rule in these areas, Tamil areas. At that point of time, Sri Lankan government made a law and declared the efforts made by TULF as separatist effort. That is why illegal. Thereafter, some of the members of these parties, they chose the radical path. It means took arms for the demand of Tamil Elam. When I say Tamil Elam, it means Tamil nation. The idea was that we can create a separate nation for Tamilians here. And along with this, some sections were of the view we can create a Tamil Elam including the Tamil Nadu part of Indian Peninsula and this part of Sri Lankan, Sri Lankan area. And that is why now this particular issue was not an issue of our neighbor, because this issue was directly hitting on the integrity of India. And that is why India could not sit hand on hand. There was a lot of pressure on central government as well to intervene into the affairs of Tamilians in this area on humanitarian ground. And I want to quote Miss Indira Gandhi at this point of time. So she made and she gave a clear message to then leader of Sri Lanka, Mr. Jayawardene, that if you don't resolve this issue of Tamilians politically, then military option is available, or you can say open for India as well. It means a direct message that since this issue is a threat to the integrity of India as well, if you don't find any political solution, then we can engage militarily in your area as well. So she was having a strong stand on this issue. A lot of pressure was on that India should engage with Sri Lanka and make Sri Lanka, you can say, give some more rights to these areas. Although conditions were not as such, and that is why groups like LTTE, Mr. Prabhakaran founded it, became important, or you can say became prominent at that point of time. And LTT was not the only, armed group of fighting for Tamil Elam. There were other groups as well. But LTT became the prominent one in due course of time. So why it was formed? Continuous discrimination and violent persecution against Sri Lankan Tamils by Sinhalese dominated Sri Lankan government. And it was happening in 1970s, 80s. LTT fought to create independent Tamil Elam, as I told you, in northeast part of island. Ethnic profile is quite clear to you, and this Tamil, Sri Lankan Tamil were facing racial discrimination, crime against Tamils, discrimination in jobs and politics. Now, after Indira Gandhiji's assassination, the India's stand, that strong stand, lose some luster, and thereafter we saw Rajiv Gandhi government. But Rajiv Gandhi government was also facing same pressure, especially from leaders like Karunanidhi, that India should engage with Sri Lanka to find a political solution here. So India intervened, and when India was intervening, so there's an interesting story there. At that point of time, Sri Lankan army entered into these areas of hotbed of Tamil rebels, and when they actually barged into these areas, there were humanitarian crises. A lot of civilian lives were lost, and at that point of time, many Tamilians in India, they asked Indian government to at least give some humanitarian support. So Indian government also sent a naval ship and clearly communicated this, that this ship of Indian Navy is having personals who are unarmed. So you should not consider it as a threat. We are just going to supply some basic food and medicines so that the people, Tamil people living here, civilian population, we are not talking about the rebels, civilian population can be supported. But that particular ship was actually engaged by Sri Lankan ship, and that's why this particular operation did not reached here, and that's why our ship moved back. Thereafter another pressure was raised that no, we should engage, and then Indian Air Force conducted an operation, and we dropped around 25 ton of you can say food and humanitarian supplies in this Jaffna region at that point of time. An interesting part is when these supplies were being dropped by Indian Air Force, at that point of time, Indian Prime Minister called on Sri Lankan ambassador in Delhi and told him that this operation is going on humanitarian grounds because it is necessary for our security as well. If we don't provide this humanitarian supply, then it can create issues in our southern belt. And that's why you should support. And another point of you can say having this operation was to give clear message to Sri Lanka, we are capable of intervening into your territory, not to actually compromise your territorial integrity, just on humanitarian ground, because this issue is not just your issue. This issue is ours as well. And at that point of time, this Sri Lankan army was getting support from Pakistan and Israel. Pakistani and Israel advisors were actually in Sri Lanka at that point of time when India was dropping supplies, food supplies in this area. And why India was not, engaging with Sri Lanka at that point of time like Pakistan and Israel was. The one reason is, it is said that Indian intelligence agency RAW has been training some of these Tamil rebels in Tamil Nadu as well, for our own interest. Because if Tamil area, in this area, we are not going to have our standpoint, then this particular area may create severe crisis, migration crisis, political crisis for India. So if we support some rebel groups, then considering the strength of these rebel groups, India's idea of finding a middle path can be accepted by Sri Lankan government. And Sri Lankan government was well aware of this, that Indian intelligence agencies supporting Tamil rebels. And it is also said that in initial time, even LTTE fighters were trained by India, but later it fall back. So after this operation, this operation of supplying, you can say essential supplies to the Jaffna, Sri Lankan government called India and they accepted that yes, we are going to have a peaceful accord, where we are going to take these Sri Lankan armies back into barrages, and you have to ensure that these fighters fighting for Tamil Elam should also disarm themselves. So India agreed, and this was considered as a political solution. But it did not bore that fruit. The reason? LTTE, which was expected to disarm itself and give weapons to Indian peacekeeping force, actually started engaging with Indian peacekeeping force. So now we've seen that the force which we sent there to protect civilians there was now bound to engage in bloody, you can say, a battle with LTTE itself. And that is why it is said that India's peacekeeping operation sent by Rajiv Gandhi government was a massive failure. So that's why it was rejected. LTTE rejected this offer, that no, we are not going to agree on some relaxations. We want Tamil Elam. So there was war between Indian Army and LTTE, as I told you, Operation Pawan. And what were the results? We have seen defeat of LTTE to some extent. It was not a complete defeat, although much casualties, civilian casualties, angry Sri Lankan Tamils, because they were thinking that India is on our side, but now Indian forces were fighting with LTTE. LTTE declared as terrorist organization in India, and assassination of Rajiv Gandhi happened in 1991. Now, after this, we have seen that in 2009, Sri Lanka, means 19 years, passed, and after that we have found that Sri Lankan government acted in a swift manner and did a clean sweep from these Jaffna regions, and now this area is clear from this Tamil rebels. And on this point, we have seen that there were huge collateral damages, and that is why India voted against Sri Lanka. First, India was abstaining, maintaining strategic silence, voted against Sri Lanka in 2009, 12, and 13 in UNHRC resolution. But it is also said that in 2009, when this operation of clean sweeping this Tamil LTT group, at that time the government in center, means Congress government, was actually at the back, headed by Ms. Sonia Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi's widow. And India did supported tactically to Sri Lankan army in having this clean sweep. And at this point of time, I would like to tell you, just search Operation Green Hunt, star Operation Green Hunt. Similar kind of suggestions were actually given by ex-Home Secretary Mr. G.K. Pillai, that we can also have similar kind of operations in left-wing extremist areas. So you should think, if Sri Lankan government did this, why Indian government is not doing that? So what are the repercussions of having such steps? Now, areas of cooperation. First, human resource. And recently, this was in news that Indian government has opened this NEET exam. These are accessible to Sri Lankan students as well, so that they can pursue MBBS and this engineering degrees and BDS in India. Apart from this, we have good amount of Indian expatriates in Sri Lanka working in tea plantation and rubber plantations. So it means our interest matter there. Apart from this, India is having huge investment in infrastructure, IT, and thereby we have our human resources stationed there. Talking from cultural relations point of view, these are the arrangements which are in place. Cultural Cooperation Agreement signed in 1977. The purpose was, we are going to have cultural exchange programs, various scholarship programs channeled by ICCR. We have joint commemoration of 2600th year of the attainment of enlightenment by Lord Buddha. Apart from this, Modi ji also visited Sri Lanka on International Vesak Day. Vesak Day, which is important from perspective of Buddha's important life event. And Sri Lanka was the one which wanted this to be celebrated as International Day, and UN accepted that. Jointly celebrated anniversary of Angar Ka Dharmapala, the famous Buddhist revivalist of Sri Lanka. India-Sri Lanka Foundation set up in 1998 and enhance this technical education cooperation. We have this Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center station in Colombo as well. As you know that soft power also matters, right? Indian Culture Center in Colombo actively promote awareness of Indian culture, offering classes in Indian music, dance, Hindi, yoga. So what is the purpose of having these engagement? Purpose is, people-to-people engagement helps in deepening ties in other areas. That is why cultural engagement should not be taken lightly. The people who are going to engage culturally may be the people who at one point of time will be bureaucrats and politicians in Sri Lanka, and that's at that point of time we can have this leverage, right? We have scholarship, as I told you, we have Buddhism, tourism. India also started this initiative of this, you can say, visa on tourism is accessible electronically. There's word there, ETV, electronic tourist visa. India is doing that for Sri Lankans. Now when it comes to commerce, India and Sri Lanka signed FTA in 1998. But this, as an outcome of this FTA, the trade balance is in favor of India. And what is the reason? Because many of the products which Sri Lanka is having could not have its space in Indian market. Sri Lankan products are lagging behind when it comes to market competitiveness. And in last visit to Sri Lanka, Modi ji also said that we are opening different sectors for different nations, and we want to have this Sri Lanka getting best out of Indian market, and we are ready to open our market more. Our market is getting more accessible now. So Sri Lanka is not quite happy with the results of FTA. Please remember, FTA was related to goods only. And as of now, India demands and India wants that Sri Lanka and India should have SEPA, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Now, at this point of time, Sri Lanka is not agreeing on that. Discussions are going on. So, what is the difference between FTA and SEPA? FTA was about goods, and when it comes to SEPA, it is about goods, services, and investments. Okay, so it is quite elaborate. So, it includes services, facilitate investment, cooperation in areas such as infrastructure, tourism, and education. Sri Lanka is second largest trading partner in SAARC. Now, 2015 Economic and Technological Cooperation Agreement talks once again restarted, and the areas are to boost our trade in goods and services, tech support, manpower training, and scientific expertise. Because if market is there, then we should engage and tap best out of that market. And if they can have access to our market and they can become self-reliant, because now we have seen that Sri Lanka is going on through economic issues and India want to position itself leader of South Asia. This can only happen when you actually bring something on table which is in favor of our neighbors, right? As part of neighborhood first policy. Now, India's trade with Sri Lanka in US dollar. Bilateral trade between India and Sri Lanka increased by around 9 times. 9 times. Between 2001 to 2018-19, now it is around, as per the last data, $6.2 billion, increasing. Now, investments are in which areas? Look at the areas: petroleum retail, IT, finance, services, real estate, telecommunication, hospitality, tourism, banking, food processing, especially tea and fruit juices, metal industry, tire, cement, glass manufacturing, infrastructure development, railway, water supply, roads. So it means there are multitude of areas where India and Sri Lanka are engaging now when it comes to commerce. When it comes to defense cooperation, just take a look over this headline. Indian Army Chief Narawane meets Sri Lankan PM Rajpaksha discussing enhancing defense ties. Because we want to actually have good standing in Indian Ocean, and we have the Sagar initiative, which is counter to the ideas which China is bringing on the table. If China is supporting in terms of infrastructure, we want to prove that China's policy are expansion in nature. They are going to compromise their sovereignty. But when it comes to India, India's idea is security and growth for all in the region, right? So we are more inclusive in this context. India Sri Lanka expressed commitment to enhance bilateral defense ties. And we also are looking on Sri Lanka as a location of our defense export. We have also given SRLNS Saryul to Sri Lanka. India and Sri Lanka conduct joint military exercise Mitra Shakti and naval exercise Slinex. India also provides defense training to Sri Lankan forces. India, Sri Lanka, Maldives agree, now this trilateral, to bolster maritime security cooperation. India, Sri Lanka conclude agreement on countering drug and human trafficking. So these are the areas where defense ties are going on. India, Maldives, Sri Lanka conduct biennial trilateral exercise Dosti, will be happening once in 2 years. India Sri Lanka issues and conflicts. Major issue, this strategic factor that China is actually taming all of these important regions by using debt trap diplomacy, right? Debt trap policy. And that is why we need to have our engagement deepen into these territories and bring alternative solutions, alternative mode of development. It is harmful for India and Indian Ocean region, because we want Indian Ocean region to be based on rule-based order. China's debt trap, Sri Lanka hands over control of Hambantota port. And here you can see the string of pearls theory. Hambantota, Gwadar, Chittagong, Bangladesh, Kyaukphyu in Myanmar. And now this is Strait of Malacca, and there you see China on Hainan Island. So China wants to actually cover, you can say, India, counter India in this South China Sea as well as this Indian Ocean region. Do we have some counter strategy in place? Yes, we do have. We are engaging in Sri Lanka as well. We are developing on this Trikomnili port in this eastern part, as well as we are having this Chabhar port here. We are having this Sitwe port here, and we are also partnering with Vietnam. We have provided more than $50 million of credit line to Vietnam for what? For actually purchasing weapons. Because Vietnam is also in conflict with China in South China Sea on exclusive economic zone. Apart from this, we have engagement with Japan in this area, right? Because China is having issues with Japan on Senkaku Diagyu Island, and that's why Japan and India's partnership in this counter strategy of string of pearls theory becomes important. It has also been supplying arms to Sri Lanka. China has invested sufficiently in building Colombo International Container Terminal by China Harbour. Now, India's effort to counter China. Number one, we are entered into a civil nuclear agreement with Sri Lanka. It means technology for peaceful use of nuclear energy. So, this is an important step. Apart from this, we have fishermen issue, right? There is no clear maritime boundary, means access available to fishermen, means fishermen, despite several guidelines by our coastal guards, they actually enter into different territory in search of fish because their livelihood depends on it. And thereafter, we saw that many fishermen get detained, sometimes killed by the forces of Sri Lanka. So, it becomes an issue. Now, there's Kachativu Island issue as well here, which was actually given to Sri Lanka during the time of Indira Gandhi ji, but still, because there's a, you can say there's no clarity there that this area will not be used by Indian fishermen as it is interpreted, and that is why many Indian fishermen also go into this Kachativu Island area because they think that this is traditionally our right, and they also dry this fisher net on Kachativu Island. And that's how they actually come into, you can say, conflict with this, you can say, Sri Lankan Navy. In the past, M. Karunanidhi also wrote this to center that Kachativu Island should not be given to Sri Lanka. And what is the background? Background is that Kachativu Island was once ruled by this kingdom of Rameshwaram. And later it was part of Madras Presidency. But as you know that this Sri Lanka was also ruled by Britishers. So when they were demarcating the territory of Gulf of Mannar, Park Strait, so at that point of time they categorized this area of Kachativu Island will be on the side of Ceylon, earlier name of Sri Lanka. And that is on this basis this Sri Lanka claimed that Kachativu Island belongs to it. To deal with the issue of detention of fishermen, we have also have an institutional mechanism. Joint working group has been established. Apart from this, there have been continuous meetings to resolve and exchange if there are prisoners, and you can say these fishermen are made prisoners. So Indian Tamilians claim this, Sri Lankan claim over this island, and you should know that legally Indian government gave this island to Sri Lanka, but specification with respect to this fisherman issue remains in light when it comes to Kachativu, because traditionally they say that this island belongs to us. History I told you. Now, significance of India-Sri Lanka relations. Number one, located in Indian Ocean. The question was significance. So one is location, and due to this location, busiest sea lanes, and that is why we should have presence around this busiest sea lane. India-Chinese competition in Indian Ocean. Because China is expansionary, does not believe in rule-based order, India wants rule-based order. This is the second significance, right? Neighborhood first policy, it driving from IAS Gujarat doctrine. So we cannot let, you can say, Sri Lanka go into the orbit of China. Fourth is maritime interest, because various maritime interests of ours converge with Sri Lankan interest, and our collaboration becomes important. Now, what are the way forwards? First, just take a look what Sri Lankan president said. our closest neighbor and long-term friend, long-standing friend. And they say that India is especially important for Sri Lanka from security perspective. Other nations can be important from commerce and other economic perspective, but along with economic commerce perspective, India is important from security perspective. Mutual trust and historical ties, they are important, or you can say key factor of this relationship. Neighborhood first policy, Sagar doctrine, as I told you, security and growth for all in this region. Primacy should be given to relationship with Sri Lanka. So please remember neighborhood first policy and Sagar doctrine. SEPA, we have been trying to actually bring Sri Lanka on table for SEPA, but as of now there are some concern. Indian government is taking step to resolve these concerns so that we can have better engagement in Sri Lanka on better terms. The biggest advantage that India is having over China when it comes to bilateral ties, because we have deep civilizational or cultural connect, which China is not having with Sri Lanka. This is our USP, right? Now Sri Lanka is Sri Lanka has entered into first nuclear partnership with India. That is also an important point. Now Chinese funding of infrastructure projects, we know that China is funding these projects, but it may compromise the sovereignty of these areas. So India is having alternative model, India is more inclusive, India is not having these points in mind. So this need to be used. Now we also have way forward in terms of counter-terrorism as well as maritime cooperation. So these are the areas where we are going to collaborate. So I hope you got ideas around India-Sri Lanka relationships, right? Now this PDF is available in this Telegram group, Shashank Tyagi for you. If you have any doubt regarding this topic or any topic, you can shoot me a message. I'll be available for you.